Have you ever caught yourself wondering why, even though you know something isn't good for you, you still feel drawn toward it? Maybe it's a certain kind of entertainment. Maybe it's a relationship that you know deep down isn't healthy. Or maybe it's just a passing thought that lingers longer than it should. In today's world, temptations are everywhere. With just one click, with just one swipe, with just one glance, we are surrounded by images, stories, and ideas that pull us into desire. And one of the most challenging areas of desire to deal with is sexuality. Now, before we go further, let's be very clear. Sexuality itself is not evil. It is a natural part of being human. The drive for intimacy, the wish to connect, the longing to love and be loved, these are deeply human needs. But just as fire can cook food or burn down a house, sexual energy can be creative and life-giving, or it can become destructive and binding. What makes the difference is not the presence of desire itself, but how we relate to it, how we act upon it, and whether our actions bring well-being or suffering to ourselves and others. This is where the concept of sexual misconduct, or what is often called wrong sexual behavior, comes in. In Buddhist teachings, it is referred to as ta dam, a term that doesn't just point to one specific act, but instead covers a wide range of behaviors and attitudes around sexuality. And in our everyday lives, it shows up in ways that might be more subtle than we realize. So, in this video, we're going to explore 3 big questions together. First, what is sexual misconduct really? And what is not considered misconduct? Second, what are the effects of lust and overindulgence on our body, mind, and relationships? And third, most importantly, how can we break free from these patterns and live a life that feels lighter, healthier, and more aligned with who we truly want to be? If this is something you've wrestled with, know that you are not alone. This conversation is not about judgment. It's not about shaming. It's about understanding, compassion, and real change. So let's take the first step together. What is sexual misconduct, and what is not? When people first hear the term sexual misconduct, their mind often jumps to extreme examples: cheating on a partner, or being involved in abusive or exploitative situations. And yes, these clearly fall under sexual misconduct, but the definition is wider, and it helps us to look at it more carefully. In Buddhism, the teaching on sexual misconduct is part of the 5 precepts, the basic ethical guidelines for living a mindful and compassionate life. The precept is usually stated as, to refrain from sexual misconduct. But what exactly does that mean? Sexual misconduct, in essence, is sexual behavior that causes harm to yourself, harm to others, harm to trust, or harm to the broader community. It can show up in obvious ways, like infidelity in a committed relationship. It can show up in hidden ways, like manipulation or using sexuality for personal gain. It can even show up in the private world of our minds, when we cultivate fantasies or habits that distort the way we see other people, as objects rather than as whole, dignified beings. Here are a few examples. A person who is married but secretly maintains another relationship outside of that commitment. A situation where one partner pressures the other into intimacy, ignoring their feelings or boundaries. Using sexuality to control or exploit, such as trading it for power, money, or status. All of these are considered forms of sexual misconduct because they break trust, create suffering, or treat another person as less than fully human. Now, just as important as knowing what is misconduct, is knowing what is not. Healthy, respectful, loving relationships, those are not misconduct. When 2 people enter into a relationship with honesty, consent, and care, they are engaging in something beautiful. Intimacy in that setting is an expression of love, of connection, of unity. It is not something to be condemned or repressed. In fact, sexuality in its healthy form can be a powerful source of bonding and joy. It's when that energy is misused, when it becomes selfish, careless, or harmful, that it turns into misconduct. This is an important point, because too often people confuse the teaching. They think that religion or spirituality is about rejecting sexuality altogether. But the truth is, the teaching is not about rejection, it's about clarity. It's about seeing clearly the difference between love and lust, between connection and consumption, between what nourishes and what destroys. The subtle ways misconduct sneaks into modern life. Let's pause for a moment and think about our daily lives today. How many hours do we spend on our phones, scrolling through images, videos, or stories that are designed to stimulate desire? Think about how advertisements work, using beauty, using seduction, using suggestion, to hook our attention. Even if we are not physically engaging in misconduct, our minds are constantly being trained to objectify, to crave, to want more. Slowly, almost without noticing, we can slip into patterns of lustful thinking that start to shape our habits and our actions. It begins with a thought. That thought becomes a habit. That habit becomes a behavior. And that behavior becomes a life. This is why it's so important to reflect on what misconduct actually means in practice. It's not just about one big act of betrayal. It's about the daily choices we make, the direction we let our hearts lean toward, and whether we are moving toward integrity or toward temptation. Moving into the second big question, the effects of lust and overindulgence. Now that we have a clearer idea of what misconduct is and isn't, let's talk about the effects. Because if it were harmless, none of us would need to worry about it. But the truth is, lust and overindulgence in sexual desire leave deep marks on our body, our mind, and our relationships. Think for a moment about fire again. A small flame, controlled, warms a house, but when it's left unchecked, it consumes everything in its path. Lust is like that. At first, it may feel exciting, pleasurable, even harmless, but when it grows too strong, it burns away clarity, peace, and even health. Let's begin with the body. Effects on the body. Science and spiritual tradition both point to the fact that overindulgence in sexual activity, or even in constant stimulation without physical activity, like excessive pornography consumption, takes a toll on the body. People often report feeling drained, fatigued, lacking in energy. This is not just a metaphor. The body has only so much energy to distribute, and when sexual energy is constantly being depleted, it can lead to weakness in other areas. For men, this might show up as decreased vitality, lower stamina, or even hormonal imbalance. For women, it can manifest as emotional exhaustion, difficulty focusing, or a sense of being off balance in their cycles. On top of that, there is the issue of addiction. Just as with substances, the brain can get hooked on the dopamine spikes that sexual stimulation brings. The more one indulges, the more tolerance builds up, and the body craves stronger and more frequent stimulation. This cycle can spiral quickly, leading to compulsive behaviors that are hard to stop. And beyond the immediate body, there is also the effect on sleep, concentration, and overall well-being. People who overindulge often report insomnia, brain fog, and lack of motivation. The body simply struggles to maintain balance when sexual energy is not being cared for wisely. Effects on the mind. But the body is only part of the picture. The mind is perhaps where the deepest scars are left. Lust, by its nature, is never satisfied. It always wants more. The mind that is consumed by lust is restless. It jumps from one thought to another, always searching, always reaching, always hungry. This creates a sense of anxiety and unease. Over time, lust also distorts perception. Instead of seeing people as whole beings, with hearts, with minds, with stories, we begin to see them as objects, as bodies, as tools for pleasure. This shift may be subtle at first, but it can deeply affect how we relate to others. It reduces human beings to parts rather than persons. And when we see others as objects, we also start to see ourselves that way. We measure our worth by attractiveness, by performance, by the ability to satisfy. The richness of human dignity gets reduced to a shallow scale of desirability. This distortion creates shame, insecurity, and loneliness, because even when lust is fulfilled, the fulfillment is temporary. Afterwards, what often lingers is emptiness, a sense that something is missing. And so the cycle begins again, craving, chasing, consuming, regretting. Effects on relationships. And then there are the relationships, the place where misconduct most visibly shows its cost. When someone is caught in lust, the ability to truly connect is weakened. Real intimacy requires presence, listening, respect, and care, but lust pushes for instant gratification, for taking rather than giving. Over time, this erodes trust. It creates suspicion, distance, and wounds that can take years to heal. Consider a relationship where one partner is addicted to pornography. Even if there is no physical affair, the other partner often feels betrayed, inadequate, or unseen. They may sense that their loved one's attention and affection are being poured into a fantasy world rather than the real bond they share. Or consider the case of infidelity. The initial excitement of the secret relationship quickly turns into guilt, fear, and eventually heartbreak when the truth comes out. The pain is not just in the act, it's in the broken trust, the shattering of something that was supposed to be safe. At this point in our journey, we've explored what misconduct is and isn't, and we've begun to look at how lust and overindulgence harm the body, the mind, and relationships. In part 2, we're going to dive deeper into those effects and then turn to the most important part: how to break free and transform that energy into something uplifting. Now that we've explored what sexual misconduct truly means and we've begun to look at the effects that unchecked desire can have on our lives, let's continue deeper into this second section and then move naturally toward solutions. When we talk about lust and excessive indulgence, it's important to remember that we are not demonizing human desire itself. Desire is a natural part of being human. Every one of us is born with impulses, cravings, and attractions. These are not evil in and of themselves. What becomes harmful is when we lose balance, when the pursuit of pleasure overrides wisdom, when impulses dictate our lives instead of us guiding them with awareness. Think about the times you may have stayed up late, scrolling endlessly on your phone, watching images or videos that gave quick bursts of stimulation but left you drained afterwards. In those moments, you may have felt a strange emptiness, almost like your energy had been stolen. This is one of the most immediate effects of overindulgence. Instead of being uplifted, you feel depleted. Instead of finding joy, you are left with restlessness. The deeper effects of excessive lust. On the physical level, overindulgence in sexual activity, pornography, or compulsive behaviors can weaken the body. In traditional medicine, it is often said that excessive release of vital energy leads to fatigue, lack of focus, and even premature aging. You don't have to believe in mystical explanations to see the reality. When the body is constantly pushed beyond its natural rhythm, it burns out, sleep quality is disturbed, hormone balance shifts, and immune function may decline. On the mental level, lust acts like a hook that keeps pulling the mind outward. Instead of being calm and centered, the mind is constantly chasing after stimulation. This makes concentration very difficult. Many people find that when they are trapped in habits of overindulgence, they cannot sit still, they cannot meditate, they cannot even enjoy a simple conversation without their mind wandering back to fantasies. The more the mind chases, the more it feels unsatisfied. This endless cycle is what the Buddha compared to drinking salty water. The more you drink, the thirstier you become. On the emotional level, lust creates both highs and lows. There is the temporary thrill, the momentary excitement, followed quickly by guilt, shame, or dissatisfaction. These emotions can become heavy burdens, especially when someone feels trapped in secrecy. A person might hide their habits from loved ones, afraid of judgment. This creates distance and dishonesty in relationships. Slowly, trust erodes, not only trust between partners, but even trust within oneself. Spiritually, lust has an even deeper consequence. It keeps us bound to craving. Instead of experiencing freedom, clarity, and compassion, the mind becomes obsessed with its own desire. This makes it harder to see reality as it is. The Buddha taught that attachment to sense desires is one of the major fetters binding beings to suffering. When we are obsessed with gratification, we miss the subtle beauty of presence, the profound joy of simply being. Relationships too suffer under the weight of unchecked lust. Instead of seeing our partner as a whole human being, someone with dreams, fears, and a soul, we may reduce them to an object of desire. Intimacy becomes shallow, connection fades. In many cases, relationships end not because of lack of love, but because desire was misdirected, turning into betrayal, manipulation, or addiction. Perhaps you have seen stories in the news of people who lost careers, families, or reputations due to sexual misconduct. Behind those headlines are lives filled with regret, showing how powerful this force can be when it is left uncontrolled. But let's be clear, the message here is not to reject desire completely, nor to feel guilty for being human. Instead, it is to recognize where the boundary lies, when a natural desire becomes an unhealthy chain. Once we see this, we can move toward transformation. And that brings us to the most important part. How do we free ourselves from the grip of lust? How to break free and transform. Freedom begins with awareness. We cannot change what we refuse to acknowledge. The very first step is to recognize the habit as it is, without self-hatred. Too often, people fall into extremes, either indulging without restraint or suppressing with guilt. Neither leads to healing. The middle path is awareness. To see clearly, this desire has arisen in my mind. If I follow it blindly, it will bring me pain. If I observe it with wisdom, it will lose its power. From this foundation of awareness, there are several practical steps that anyone can take. 1. Replace harmful habits with nourishing ones. The mind seeks stimulation. If we try to cut something off without giving it a healthier substitute, we create a vacuum. That's why it's essential to fill life with uplifting activities. Exercise, creative work, reading, meaningful friendships. All of these provide positive energy. For example, instead of sitting alone in boredom, which often triggers old habits, you could choose to go for a walk in the park, pick up a musical instrument, or call a friend. Slowly, the brain rewires itself to find joy in healthier outlets. 2. Practice mindfulness of the body and senses. One powerful Buddhist practice is satipatthana, mindfulness of the body. When lust arises, instead of fighting it, bring attention to the sensations themselves. Notice the heat, the tension, the restlessness. Observe how these sensations rise, peak, and fade. By watching with a calm mind, you begin to see that desire is not solid, it is a passing wave. This insight reduces its control. 3. Guard the sense doors. Just as we lock our houses to prevent intruders, we must also guard what enters through our eyes, ears, and minds. If we constantly expose ourselves to stimulating images or environments, it becomes much harder to stay balanced. This doesn't mean living in fear, but being wise with choices. For example, unfollowing harmful accounts online, limiting exposure to explicit media, and spending more time in wholesome environments. 4. Build a supportive community. No one overcomes deep habits alone. In the Buddha's teaching, the Sangha, a community of like-minded practitioners, is one of the 3 jewels. Surround yourself with people who uplift you, who remind you of your values, who encourage growth. Even a single trusted friend to talk openly with can make a huge difference. 5. Transform energy through service and creativity. Lust is energy. When suppressed, it becomes frustration. But when transformed, it becomes vitality. Channel that same energy into art, music, writing, volunteering, or helping others. You may be surprised how powerful you feel when that restless energy is redirected into building something meaningful. 6. Develop spiritual perspective. Meditation, prayer, reflection on teachings. These remind us of the bigger picture. Life is not just about chasing temporary pleasures. When we connect with our higher values, our compassion, our longing for wisdom, the pull of desire weakens. You might sit quietly and reflect. Will this action bring me closer to peace? Or further into restlessness? This simple question can guide choices. 7. Be patient and compassionate with yourself. Breaking free is a journey, not an overnight event. There may be setbacks. There may be days when old habits return. Do not lose heart. Even progress in small steps is still progress. Just as a tree grows slowly but steadily, transformation takes time. What matters is persistence, honesty, and kindness toward yourself. As we come to the close of this reflection, let us return to the wisdom of the Buddha. In the Dhammapada, verse 359, he says, "From lust springs grief, from lust springs fear. For him who is wholly free from lust, there is no grief, much less fear." These words capture the essence of what we have been discussing. Lust, when uncontrolled, breeds suffering and fear. But when we learn to let go, when we free the heart from its grip, peace naturally follows. My friend, the invitation today is not to deny who you are, but to rise above the impulses that keep you chained. You are capable of freedom. You are capable of love that is pure, relationships that are honest, and joy that is lasting. So I encourage you, take one step today. Perhaps it's choosing awareness over habit. Perhaps it's reaching out to someone you trust. Perhaps it's simply sitting quietly, breathing, and watching your thoughts without judgment. Whatever it may be, let it be a step toward freedom. And before we end, I want to invite you to join this journey together. If this message has touched you, if it has sparked a reflection in your heart, please subscribe to this channel so we can continue exploring wisdom and practical guidance for daily life. And most importantly, I would love to hear from you. What are your thoughts on this issue of sexual misconduct and lust in daily life? How have you seen it affect yourself or those around you? Please share in the comments below. Your perspective might be the light that helps someone else. Thank you for listening. Thank you for reflecting. And may you walk this path with clarity, strength, and compassion.